Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, dear guests, we're going to move from political to geopolitical now, after a very tensed political discussion. On behalf of the Martens Center for European Studies and the Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute for Democracy, I would like to welcome you to our discussion. Europe is facing a perma-crisis that marks not just a difficult period, but in fact the emerge of a new era. An era where the certainties of the last 80 years are being reshaped and I would say even dismantled. So in this world of shifting alliances and broken certainties, Europe is not simply asked to respond. It's been challenged to redefine itself, to redefine in governments and economic model, to redefine its strategy and even its global partnerships, and perhaps, and most critically, its political identity. So to help us unpack these urgent themes, I'm honored to be joined by a panel of distinguished guests. Mrs. Viviane Reding, a historic figure in European politics and former Vice President of the European Commission. Mr. Klaus Welle, Chairman of the Academic Council of the Martens Center for European Studies and former Secretary General of the European Parliament. Mr. Theodoros Skylakakis, Member of the Greek Parliament and former Minister of Environment and Energy. And Mr. Zavvos, Chairman of the Hellenic Development Bank. I will start with Mrs. Reding. Mrs. Reding, Europe is facing a polycrisis. Energy insecurity, demographic decline, rising of populism, geopolitical instability. And now we have the tensions with the United States. In your view, is this an existential moment for Europe or an opportunity to change our strategy, and in which direction?
It is both. It is, of course, an existential moment, but it is most of all an opportunity. And that has to do with the way Europe works. When everything goes well, the European member states agree not to agree, discuss a lot, take a lot of time doing things, and lean back. We have seen it the years before. Cheap defense from the US, cheap manufacturing from China, and cheap energy from Russia. And we invest into well-being. But when things go wrong, crisis, financial crisis, corona crisis, now the war, then all of a sudden everybody agrees to agree. And we do things very quickly, and we do things we never thought them possible to be done in a very, very short time. I give you one idea. You know, the Greeks inside here mostly, how difficult it was during the financial crisis to have the debt breaks overcome. Not possible at all, because constitution, because here and that. Well, it lasted very, very shortly now with the wars, and even Germany, the Schuldenbremse, was eliminated in a constitutional decision in 2 weeks' time. And Europe is thinking about having a relief on the way the countries, the member states can invest. Mm-hmm. So very quickly we move when there is a problem, and I think that these problems now will have the tendency to make us to realize that we need a real single market and not a patchwork, which we have today. And this patchwork is not making it possible for us to be more efficient, to build an economy. We need European champions instead of regional or national champions which have no influence on the world economic map. So all this is going very quickly now, and I think that one should, Trump, not Trump, forget about that. We need an independent security an independent economy, an independent development of our digital future.
Mr. Welle, do you agree that we actually are so flexible and adaptable as the European Union in order to confront with this polycrisis as we describe it?
I think first we should say, and I think it's the truth, that the tariffs are an act of United States self-harm. I've just seen the figures this morning from the Kiel Institute for Weltwirtschaft, which is quite renowned. So what is their guess? US output, as a consequence of the tariff, should shrink by 1.7%. EU output, 0.2%. US prices by tariffs plus 7%, because also a lot of the input factors become more expensive. Ours, minus 0.9%. Why? Because there's more competition. US export, minus 20%. EU, minus 0.6%. So first, this is an act of American self-harm. Of course, if their bet is going to be successful, that everybody comes in and, finally these tariffs are not going to last, we are in a different situation, but it's not good for the United States themselves. What we can do, as Viviane Reding has said, go for the internal market. We still, for example, in telecom have 27 different markets. We need one market. Canada is now thinking of a much larger customs union. We are thinking of Australia, Canada, maybe the European Union. So why don't we build a bigger customs union among ourselves? Trade agreements, Mercosur, we have to do it. Alternative market. India is interested to have a trade agreement with us relatively quickly. That's something we can do. And even the build-up of defense because of Russia has the chance to build up a European high-tech sector, because a lot of this is not dump material anymore, but artificial intelligence.
Mr. Skylakakis, Mr. Welle described what we could possibly do, how to react. And I wonder, there is a debate in Europe whether to actually continue with some countermeasures or continue with dialogue. Which do you think is the best solution for European Union and for countries like Greece, for example?
Let's start by saying that Europe now has the biggest challenge, at least since the Second World War, because at the same time it has to build defense by itself. It has to go along with a major disruption in world trade by the new American policies, which probably will last for at least 4 years. And it has to tackle climate change, not the transition, which is expensive and inefficiently done. It should be done a lot more efficiently, but with the adaptation to climate change, which is going to hit all the world economies very hard for the next year and the next decade and the next 30, 40 years. So we have a big challenge. And I tend to agree with what I have heard, that when Europe is challenged very stressfully, it's the only time that it really puts its act together.
Yeah.
And this is a unique historic chance to do that. Now, how we should react to the American policies? First, we should remain calm. It's, what happens now is a repoliticization of the international trade. Politics gets back into international trade. This is very bad. We go from a rules-based trade to a deals-based trade. Mm. This we must not permit. It will be totally devastating. And we are big enough. Americans have 24% of the global economy. I don't know for how long. We have 17. I don't know for how long. But Chinese have 18. So everybody will be influenced, will be impacted by what is happening and impacted very badly for quite a long time. But we must remain calm. We must remain very targeted on what we do. And this war between global economy that is efficient or regional or national economies that are by definition inefficient, we must win. And we must win it in political terms and in the long run. We must not lose this war. But to do that, we must remain united and calm.
Mm-hmm. That is a very clear message, I think. Mr. Zavvos, in which direction do you think the strategic reply, the strategic answer from Europe has to be?
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers. And I'm very happy to see here all colleagues from the European Parliament and your colleagues from the government. The first thing is to have to understand in what era we are. Want it or not, we're in an era of realpolitik. Want it or not, trade has turned into an instrument of geopolitical statecraft. In other terms, what President Macron says, we're in economy of war. Probably exaggerated, I would say we're already in a war, a rearmament economy. Obviously, Europe has to have a unified reply to what it does, but what has to do is that needs a bold, strategic reconfiguration of markets, institutions, and especially of mindset. First, I think it's important that Europe diversifies its trade ties beyond the transatlantic axis. That means that it has other alternatives to forge trade relations with almost 80% of the world, without obviously abandoning what it's doing with the United States. Second, it's a great chance to work on a defense union, which means a common market of defense. Yes. I would agree with my colleague, Mr. Skylakakis, that we're a unique moment. Why? Because as Greeks know well since the time of Thucydides, fear of the enemy, once that was a distant notion, now it shapes political associations. And that's very good for Europe because it's the best moment to move on. Therefore, defense is an important issue, and when we say defense and security is directly linked with industrial policy. Third is the issue of competitiveness. And when I'm talking about competitiveness, here is the big challenge of Europe avoiding the mid-tech trap, therefore moving and heavily investing in innovation. Innovation is not a matter for experts. Innovation is a matter of survival of the European welfare states, because that reassures productivity. And Europe has, again I say, to heavily invest not only in the innovative state, but especially making sure that and fostering diffusion of technology throughout all the sectors of the economy. Then, as my colleagues have said, we need to deepen urgently the single market, which is our real powerhouse. And when we're talking about single market, we're talking about the very important obstacles intra-European that need to be slashed. As you know, for goods we have almost 44%, for services 110%. Why the hell, 30 years after Delors, common market, single market, we haven't yet finalized the European banking market? Why we don't move very forcefully and urgently to complete the capital markets union, which is an important source of private finance to be able to finance innovation, the double transition, defense, and affordable housing? How else we're going to do knowing that public finance is not sufficient? And let me say probably finally, a good message that comes these hours from Berlin, that just we have a new government with former colleague Friedrich Merz as chancellor, and who has made a historic turn in his policy by abolishing the rigid fiscal rules and moving finance right now for growth and infrastructure. That is a very important message at the moment that Europe has to send a message around the world that is the sole voice of sanity in a world that has really lost its compass.
Mr. Merz actually broke a taboo, I would say, in Germany, but also Mr. Welle spoke about it, about breaking another taboo, and I would like to ask Mrs. Reding, do we actually need to find a way to cooperate with countries with which we don't actually have common values and common views, but we have some common interests at this point, for example?
Yes, and we have done it already before Trump. By the way, I want to underline that the trade agreement, which we were during years and years negotiating with the United States, the TTIP, was rejected by former Trump. So since the second von der Leyen Commission took over, the trade negotiations with other parts of the world have been accelerated. And that is important because we must know that 80% of our trade is not in the US. So Mercosur, India, ASEAN, like-minded people, not necessarily concerning democracy and rule of law, but concerning the rules of a fair trade agreement. And we should do that very quickly. The moment is there because of the crisis. Because all these long discussions and small talk and tit for tat is gone, and we see now the importance. By the way, I would like to say that the citizens follow us. No, the citizens precede us because they are more quick than we do. In the latest Eurobarometer, 74% of Europeans say that Europe is a very good thing for them. And what they would like for Europe and their governments to do, the first one is defense. A European defense, which we are trying to set up since decades, but it was always no, and completely national prerogative. All of a sudden, the citizens say, no, do it together. And the second one, to do economy, but not economy, in my small part of Europe, but all Europe together, what I said, to build European champions. And I agree with my colleague when he said, for doing this, we need to build a capital market union. Why? Because we are very strong on banking and very poor on private investment. Our private investment goes to the United States. And from the United States, it buys our companies. Can you imagine? Crazy. We have to leave these hundreds of billions of private money in Europe, make possible that private investment becomes possible, and then go ahead. Because I am not worried on this if we have the money, because we are very good in talent. We have good universities who produce good engineers, good specialists. That's perfect. We are very good in research also. That comes automatically out of good talent. For instance, we are capable to have a lot of patents in Europe. And we are very good in helping startups to be built. And then we lose. Because when the startups become companies, we do not have enough money which goes into this. That is why, and I'm very glad to see that due to the crisis now, a discussion which is 10 years old to build a capital market union is coming to completion. Finally, which brings me back to what I said first, we need a serious crisis in order to advance. If things go well, Europe is leaning back. It's not a time to lean back, it's a time to be united and to fight.
Mr. Welle, actually, Mrs. Reding described how European citizens actually support the idea of Europe, but at the same time, we see the return of populistic nationalism in Europe. And I wonder whether we need to actually respond to that and how to respond in order to defend our democratic values.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. In fact, Donald Trump might help us because he might serve as a cure. Because people might find out that to have somebody who is a strong leader and who can take quick decisions might also bring very quick disasters. And we had a similar case with Vladimir Putin, who was convinced that in 3 days he would conquer Kiev, and after 3 years they have just occupied a relatively small part of Ukraine. So I would suggest that we differentiate between, in the populist right, between what I call the destructive right and the constructive right. What is the destructive right? The destructive right are those who try to destroy parliamentary democracy, destroy the European Union, destroy the rule of law. There are others who have maybe different views on abortion or other issues, LGBTQ, but they respect the rule of law, parliamentary democracy, and everything we have built since 1945. And fortunately, in Europe, this sector is divided in 3 different parliamentary groups in the European Parliament. With some you can work together, with some you can't. Some have just different opinion on individual issues, others try to destroy our system, so we are in a better situation as they are. So one mechanism is to cooperate with those who are ready for cooperation. For the rest, we have to address our economic issues, as already said. We have to reduce overregulation. We have to scale. The market. We have to develop a high-tech sector through defense, as it was done in the United States. But we also have to keep our social cohesion, which was lost in the United States, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe Europe is still the best place in the world you want to live in.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, you have to keep the fact that we have 2 speakers up until now that they say that Donald Trump can be a positive catalyst for Europe. So this is a very optimistic message, and I would like to highlight that. And I will go to Mr. Skylakakis. Do you accept also this idea of this positive catalyst for Europe? And do you think that we need to find a new political narrative for Europe?
Look, when something destructive happens, we are going to pay as well. So let's not be too optimistic. But there are some things that are going to happen because they are linked in that way. First, the new nativism or nationalism that the US administration is promoting is not an exportable thing. You cannot export nationalism. It's by itself impossible. It is something that creates, because this US administration is attacking Europe, it creates, however, a new, I would say nationalist, but it's not, European nationalism. Because Europe now, for the first time, is under attack as a concept. Unfairly, it was never built to harm America, but now it's under attack. And this brings the Europeans together politically in a way that they have not been together, I think, for many decades, since the Second World War. And this attack will continue. This war will not stop. No. It will last for at least a couple of years. More likely, it will last the whole Trump term. And at the same time, it opens us a big opportunity. US is taking itself out for the moment from the place of the leader of the free world, the leader of multilateral trade, and the leader of who has the reserve currency. And it does that not because of the tariff policy. It does that because it undermines the institutions that are behind a stable reserve currency.
Yes.
So there is a big opportunity of Europe to step in, because in nature, void never happens. So there's a big opportunity for Europe to step in, if it does what you are saying and what you are saying, to step into that position and to have a much more, if the Trump period does not multiply for decades in the US, a much more balanced role together with the United States in the next decades in the world today. Because what we have and what we must keep is stable institutions. There is nowhere in the world that institutions are more stable, this is proven today, than in Europe. And this is our treasure. This has immense economic value, and immense political value. And this is what we have to cherish, promote, and use in this crisis and the years to come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Skylakakis. Mr. Zavvos, regardless of the political analysis, we have the numbers. And I wonder how vulnerable is the European Union to external shocks like the world trade, the trade war from the United States, and which are the implications for countries like Greece? And one more question, which is related to your banking hat. Which role can the banking sector can actually play in this situation?
Okay. First of all, again, we make clear that when a world whereby at least the 30 last years and more recently, US has gone Hobbesian, whereby Europe still remains Kantian in the best world. There are obviously risks which we cannot know yet, because there are some immediate risks, as we say, world trade, and other risks that might be evolving in the near future. But knowing that we have been in an environment with abrupt readjustments taking place, I would agree also with Theodoros Skylakakis that there is an area that there is big opportunities and possibilities, and that's good to grasp them. Especially in the financial area, one can see always that if there are currency insecurity, euro could be reinforced. Also, we see today that even Wall Street is really shaking its very edifice that had for the last, let's say, 100 years. But the key question for a country like Greece, a small, medium European country in this big world compilation, is really to understand which way it could go, because priorities has been realigned. And also, we're living through a period whereby modern economy and state, they're heavily shaped by what we know as a cognitive industrial revolution, triggered especially by AI. And this affects and will impact very much economic structures and state structures as well as politics. Therefore, currently, we stand in a threshold of fundamental reconfiguration of both state and economy, which is driven by two very important forces. External forces, what's happening in the geopolitics and geoeconomics, but also technology. And these pressures have to lead us to some, I would say, policy shaping. For Greece, I think there is a great possibility to reconfigure a new, I would say, cognitive industrial strategy with dynamic synergies in the following four sectors. First, as I mentioned before, innovation as a driving force of competition and saving the welfare state. Secondly, Greece has a great possibility to become, I would say, a hub of defense technology, especially given what Prime Minister Mitsotakis has announced as an important packet of 25 billion euros for the next 12 years. And that tallies perfectly well with the new European priorities. Having next to me the former minister and very successful minister of energy, I would say Greece is destined also to become a hub of energy for the southeastern Europe. Energy union is also a must for the European Union. Slashing prices and being competitive is the required, I would say, political decision to be taken. And finally, in order to be able to support all these things, Greece needs a new financial system able to support the previous priorities. Now, your question regarding what probably development banks can do, because I also am chair
quite short
in a minute, or probably I thought, have more minutes, but it's okay. Development banks are the ideal, I would say, financial organizations appropriate for this time. Why? Because they have the financial power and the means to address market failures, to create new markets, and especially to support economies like the Greek economy in case really we're driven through the international and in difficult straits. Why? We have already, as a Hellenic Development Bank, disbursed more than 10 billion. We have active 4 billion euros, especially destined for a double transition, small and medium-sized enterprises, also for affordable housing, energy, and this thing can be also readjusting given the new needs. I would add also that as development banks, we're really the key institution supporting development in this country and innovation, and will be creating in the very near future a patent fund for startups that is mostly necessary, I think, for this country. Therefore, in the new reconfiguration also of the Greek financial system, the Hellenic Development Bank plays, but has to play an even more increasingly role, especially even if need be, we don't know yet the situations, but be able also to support a defense technology through EU probably financing.
I feel the time pressure, I have to say. So, Mr. Skylakakis, which do you think are going to be the implications for Greece of this global turbulence?
Well, Greece is going to be hit relatively late from what's going on, because its exports in the US are quite small, and we have a balanced trade relationship, and our main, let's say, industries are tourism and shipping, and these are going to be hit by the second wave of what's going to happen. We're going to get a hit. There's no question about it. But we will get it more in 2026 than in 2025. We will, because we are an importer of energy, we will, for a short period, get the benefit of the lower energy prices for imported energy. But then, as everybody, we're going to get hit by what is going to happen next in the global trade and in the financial markets, because what we are seeing is not the end of what is going to happen in the markets. It's the beginning. We don't know. What is going on now is an experiment of immense proportions that has never happened in the world. Nobody has done in such a short term such a U-turn in globalization and world economic efficiency. Nobody. And it's going to hit in various points, and we don't know how all this will interact. if you look into models, some people have modeled some parts of that, but the models are for one aspect only. Nobody has modeled what will happen if all of this happens together. For example, dollar getting weaker and not being the reserve currency that it once was. A huge trade war. International investments entering an era of unpredictability. Where are you going to invest? You don't know where to invest. Are you going to invest in Vietnam or in the US? Let's say a question. You might wait for 3-4 years to make that decision. All that happening together, we haven't seen it. So what I would say is we must be very prudent. We must move forward with economic reform. We must take care of our state. Our state is our big problem. We must make it a lot more efficient. And we must keep our political stability and our political predictability. Because in an unstable world, political stability, predictability, and reasonable economic policy is going to be much more important than in a stable world.
So two quick questions for our last two panelists. Mrs. Reding, for Mrs. Reding and Mr. Welle, it's the same question. In fact, actually, in these times, Greece has been transitioned from a symbol of crisis to a symbol of recovery and resilience. And I wonder, from your European perspective, how would you assess the work of the current Greek government role in this transformation? And are there any conclusions for Europe?
Well, I think that the two people before have said what Greece is about. The lessons for Europe is that we have done very well. We did not leave Greece out when the problems were very big. And God knows that we all had, outside of Greece, a lot of political discussions with our voters if we should go for it. We didn't listen to the discussions. We said, yes, we are in a community. Yes, we have to have solidarity. And yes, we have to go for it, cost it what it will. Mm-hmm. Draghi said it later on also. And it was right. And I think that is a lesson. That is a lesson also in this time of insecurity. What has Europe to offer? Europe has to offer a very big market, democracy, rule of law, and credibility. And that is why I agree with all the panelists here. We must not become nervous and we must not overreact. Mm-hmm. All the other countries in the world are looking for us. How are we going to do? And what I said already before, 80% of our trade is not with United States. And the trade decision making is a European competence. It's not a national competence, thanks God.
Thank God.
Oh, thanks God.
Thank God.
But if you have a European competence, and you must not do it top down, like in the United States. You must do it with all together. And that is why I think that the way the Commission is working now, speaking with all the members, hearing all the industries, and then moving cautiously in order to think not in a short run, but to think in a long run, and to think about world credibility is the right way to proceed. Mm-hmm. Thanks God we are doing that.
Thank you. Mr. Welle, your final remark?
Yes, thank you. Maybe just two remarks from my side. It was, of course, a very tough time for Greece since 2008, mm-hmm. but maybe two signs of success. One, the Greek debt is again investment grade. and that shows that the international community is trusting that this reform process has been deep and successful. And secondly, the government could recently decide, if I'm correctly informed, to raise the minimum wage. So, which also means that, the normal population are also profiting from this. So I think we can say that this was a very tough, but at the end a successful transition, and the current government can, can be proud of where it's gotten.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick comment. You have less than 30 seconds.
And quick comment, because also important one, We did, as I said before, we have investment grade, and I would say during the time when the Ministry of Finance, did the Hercules scheme, whereby we slashed down in record times with very successful results the huge NPLs. So the Greece at that time standing up to 76 billion and being now less than 5 billion. Therefore, a great success that opened the floodgates for the financial system, the banking system, to finance the economy, to spur growth, and obviously making the heavy lift towards obtaining the investment grade for Greece. So that tallies perfectly well with the message of Klaus Welle.
Let me, 10 seconds.
Okay.
Greece today, I'm saying that as in my previous job as alternate Minister of Finance and responsible for fiscal policy, has the most open books in terms of fiscal policy. I would say in the world, and this is a result of the reforms done during the years of the crisis, because these books are unprecedented on how, in every detail, everybody knows where we stand in terms of fiscal policy. I would like to point that out because it's very important for the next 3-4 years.
So I keep your realistic optimism then, and although I represent a think tank, I think it's time not to think about Europe, but it's time to act for Europe. And I would like to thank our distinguished guest. I would like to thank Delphi Forum for this magnificent platform. I would like to thank the Martens Center and my colleague Panagiotis for his cooperation. I would like to thank my Social Do team for their support and inspiration. And of course, I would like to thank you for being here today for this very important conversation. And I'm calling to the floor Mrs. Skylakakis, who is acting general manager of the Greek, the Hellenic Bank Association.